All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 130 of The Hideout, our weekly spaces where we talk all things Web3, gaming, and the Metaverse. We've got another stack panel today, so I'm excited to dive in. Little housekeeping beforehand for those of you who don't know me, because I see some new faces. My name is Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind Satoshiverse, Legions 2029, our game, and this Hideout Spaces. My journey through the space dates all the way back to 2017. Before that, I worked as a lawyer in the entertainment industry and kind of made a career change when I heard about Web3 and saw the opportunity it presented for digital asset ownership and kind of red pilled in. We've been building Satoshiverse since 2020. It started off as a comic book or NFT collaboration with the late great Jose Delbo, who was 87 at the time we started the project. He, if you don't know, spent about 60 years working for Marvel and DC Comics before becoming one of the top NFT artists in the space. And then he passed about a year and a half, or about a little over a year ago, after creating our core character, Satoshi the Creator. Everything else has kind of followed from that. Legions 2029, I won't talk too much because we've got some awesome panelists who I also want to give introductions. But if you are familiar with the game, check out the pinned tweet at the top of the spaces. It's got some gameplay and a bunch of the things we are doing right now with our season 2. Suffice to say, it's a free-to-play game, so the best way to experience it is just to download it. But it's a third-person hack and slash high-fidelity PC game. So if you like God of War and certain games like that, and if you have kind of a liking for games like Diablo and Hades, this game kind of combines elements of all three. So definitely check it out. But now what we will do is we will jump over to our guests. What I'll ask you guys to do is please give a quick introduction of yourselves, what you're building, the projects, and then feel free, please, if you have any kind of illustrative content, gameplay videos, whatever it might be, pin it up to the top of the spaces. We'd love to see it. And then we'll jump into our questions after we do introductions. Why don't we start with Claire? Welcome to the spaces.
Hey all. Yeah, so this is Claire from Super B marketing team. So I gotta, pin the, a content later when other people are speaking. So basically Super B is a social-fi game that is built on Sui network. Actually, all of us are from Sui because, we're kind of partner of Sui, so we decided to join this, AMA together, as a concept of Sui takeaway. So anyway, just to come back to Super B, introduction. So, we are basically social game, but we are having this 12 mini games in total as a competitive mode that you can just compete with other users or AI agent. And we are also having this, social mode that has a social interaction that you can customize your own space and you can just collaborate with each other as a social interaction space called Brick City. So this is what we're aiming to build. We're aiming to build a AAA scene park on Sui network. And currently we're on a beta test stage of closed beta test 2. It's going on now. So yeah, you can hop into our, closed beta test 2. I'm gonna just talk about this later when we have more time. So let me just quickly stop the introduction as we have more guests.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the spaces. And we had a Sui overtake last week, and I'm glad to have another one. The Sui's doing some great stuff in gaming. So great to see some awesome projects here. And I'm a big fan of kind of the combination of playground games and social-fi with, the DeFi element. So excited to hear more, and definitely welcome to the spaces, and thanks for helping organize all of this. Let's jump over then to Overtake. Welcome to the spaces.
All right. Welcome guys. Mind my slow speaking. It's quite late time, where I'm based at. I can't believe how Claire is just lively as it's just a lovely afternoon. But anyways, good morning guys. I'm community lead for Overtake. My name's DW. Overtake is a peer-to-peer marketplace on Sui Network. It's for trading gaming assets such as your game items, game accounts, just anything you could think of. And all your assets will be securely traded via smart contracts, escrow. So, we were actually a gaming project in the immutable chain previously, but right now we are more focused on the marketplace, building on Sui. RTG is coming in August. Great to be here.
Amazing. Well, definitely need the infrastructure as much as we need the content. So glad to have you here and hear your perspectives as we dive in. And then last but definitely not least, let's jump over to Warped. Welcome to the spaces.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me. I am Adam, CEO and audio guy at Warped Games. We're building Warped Universe. It's a single player and co-op PvE game where you can choose the style of genre for each mission. So as every mission you jump into, you can choose between real-time action or turn-based strategy on the ground or in flight and space. So it's kind of like a mix of Helldivers 2 with Everspace and then XCOM as like the strategy turn-based side. And we are building on our on-chain side, the Web3 side on Sui, like everyone else here.
Super cool. Well, I am definitely excited to hear more. I know we were going to dive in a bit deeper with the questions. So good to have those introductions. And yeah, let's jump over to Spencer, who will take care of any housekeeping items that I missed and take us away as the host for the space. Spencer?
What's going on, everyone? My name is Spencer. I am the business development manager here with Satoshiverse and Apollo Entertainment. Excited to be here helping to host the space today. So like Nick said, I will be asking all the question on today's space. And real quick before we get into those questions though, I have a couple housekeeping items. So the first thing I'm going to do is pin a tweet to the top of the space. There we go. So the tweet that I just pinned that says "We're live," that is for the giveaway that we use and then we do every week on the Hideout. So this week we are giving away 500 bits, which is our in-game soft currency that is needed to do all sorts of fun stuff within our game Legions 2029. Very, very important thing to have. So in order to win 500 bits, all you have to do is just stick around until the end of the space. So sit around, enjoy the space, enjoy what all of our amazing speakers have to say today. And if you're still here, we will choose a random winner at the end. So good luck, everyone, on that. Getting into the format of the space, we will start out with a group discussion question. I will start by, calling on someone to start. And then we will just jump into the discussion from there. Feel free to, just jump in. No need to raise hands or anything like that. Then we'll get into some individual questions for each of you guys. And then if we have time again at the end, we'll do some more group discussion questions. So without further ado, let's get into the first question. And why don't we have Warped start us out with this one? So Web3 is changing how players interact, compete, and collaborate. What's one shift you think that will define the next generation of Web3 multiplayer experiences?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can answer this in many different ways, but basically, the technology is evolving super fast to the point where, previously games were very, in Web3 were focused on what was available, and back then, it was just mostly DeFi mechanics, and there wasn't enough time to implement, intricate games within the system. You had to build around what Web3 offered. But now with, Sui and other chains that are implementing more modern features and tech, you have a lot more availability to go beyond the limitations of back then. So I think what's actually going to happen is the big shift you'll actually see Web3 less and less because it'll be in the back end and it won't be as, it won't block you in various ways. It'll be more seamless and to the point where you don't even notice it, because before Web3 gamers were very DeFi oriented. They knew how to use DeFi because that was what was available. But now we can now start inviting gamers that aren't even familiar with Web3, and they can get onboarded and and use the features without even really knowing they're using it, and warm up to it. And I think that's the big shift is we're going to get more mainstream style games, and the focus will be on actual games, and Web3 will kind of plug in the background because, people play games and they don't talk about what, they use, different types of networks or payment solutions for what games they're playing. They just want to play the game, and I think that's how Web3 is going to fit in. It wasn't able to back then, back in last cycle and previous, but now it's got that ability to. So the big shift is basically you're going to see it less more, but use it more.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I kind of think that it's interesting, right? Because when we talk about the abstraction of Web3 and starting to back end it more, I think that goes hand in hand with starting to focus on some of the value propositions of Web3 without kind of beating the Web3 drum. And I think that's where we're going to end up going. I think that it's tough because, when I joined the space back in 2017, it was because of gaming with a gaming focus. And I thought this would be the type of movement where we kind of say, hey, here's all the wonderful things Web3 can do. Even though the tech's not there yet, like this is the dream. And then consumers would love it, right? And we would, get a kind of a huge wave of consumers really pushing for this because it was such a consumer oriented, product, and so much of the solution was focused on ownership and privacy and a lot of the other things that gamers have been kind of asking for a long time, right? And maybe not even knowing, and I think that was the problem, not even knowing they needed it. I think that in the near future, digital assets in general, digital is going to become more prevalent in our lives, and we're going to more and more be valuing digital possessions on the same level that we value physical possessions. And I think with that, there's going to be a lot of discussions about things like ownership, about the rights you have with digital assets, about resale rights, things like that have been, kind of put to the back burner for a long time intentionally, I think, by games. I think both because games have certain revenue incentives and profit incentives to not allow true digital ownership. I think that, there's also many legal reasons why games don't just open up the floodgates to, UGC sales and, downstream sales for their products and custodying assets for their users. And so I think there's like some tangible things from the developer side that Web3 does in terms of enabling certain real money transactions that probably were regulatorily tricky before that now may not be. And so I think that we're going to see bigger games, more popular games with this ability to backend the Web3, use it as a way to expand the pot, right? Find business models that work with that pot expansion. And I do think that's where we start to see the major wave of onboarding. Once we start to see, like he said, Web3 get back-ended, and then, really a focus to the value proposition. You can now trade your assets. You can now use them in other games. There's this interoperability layer. There's a composability layer. There's things happening, in an automated way outside of the ecosystem where, connecting things to different, holdings that you may have in other ecosystems. So there's a lot that can be done. I think there's a lot that needs to be done on the legal side, specifically, like the whole world would need to catch up to these new digital rights that we're saying we have. But I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I also feel like, I've been in space a similar amount of time since 2016, 17, and there was a lot of ideas that we wanted to do, but, studios didn't have like third-party solutions of implementing and plugging into Web3 stuff. And so you say, we're going to build, I was on a Metaverse project and a game project years ago, and like, you say this, we want to build this game and want it to be on chain, but then there was no one else that we could partner with that would help us implement it. So we're like, studios would have to build it all themselves. And you spend all your time and revenue on building the marketplace and the on-chain part of it. And then you run out of time to build the game because games take a long time to build themselves. And now with all these other third-party solutions, you can just focus on the game. Studios can focus on the game and just partner with people or projects that can help them plug into, being on chain. Whereas you couldn't do that before. You had to, do it all, and you'd run out of time. The crypto Web3 side is so fast, and it's hard to keep up if you're trying to do so many things at once. And so now there's options for studios to just plug in, really.
Yeah, 100%. I think the infrastructure side, we built most of our game in early 2021, and like you said, there was nothing there, and we really did spend a lot of time focused on building those Web3 rails. And now, there's blockchains that have the whole suite as part of the protocol, but then there's, several third parties, Third Web and Sequence, and there's probably 10 others that do really great jobs of just packaging it up in a modular way that developers can use. And yeah, I think that's going to lead to a major influx of developers using it. But I think, again, we still have to focus on that value proposition, right? Developers have to see, okay, there's something here that helps me achieve some goal that I have for this game, beyond just a philosophical idea that we should own our assets, right? Because I don't know that all game developers necessarily agree with that. And I think that's the challenge. The challenge is kind of finding those sustainable business models so that we do see it starting to get incorporated. But I think it's going to go there. I think there's just, we're seeing a movement towards digital assets generally. And as that happens, we're going to start to address some of the problems that I don't even think the space knows it has yet. I'd love to hear from the others. Overtake, Claire, what do you guys think about this? Where do you see this whole Web3 gaming space going? What's going to define this next generation of Web3 multiplayer experiences?
Well, like I say, Adam and like you both already kind of telling all the like important factors. So I was just like thinking, should I have to hop in or not to the discussion? So just I'll tell you a little bit about my idea. Yeah, just to briefly let you know, make an excuse that I hopped into this like gaming industry like literally last year. So just to share my insight from a year experiences, I firstly agree with what you two says, and just to add a little bit, yeah, I guess Web3 games, next generation, should be defined as users who literally enjoy the Web3 game, not only just focusing on play to earn experiences, but I think it's kind of similar context to what you said, but if users not only focus on earning, for instance Axie Infinity, CryptoKitty, just my personal impression is they were more on earning side, so they were just always thinking, so what's the reward? What can I earn from this? What I heard is they never enjoy the game itself. Maybe some of them would enjoy, but what I heard from other users or other research was the users didn't enjoy the game itself, but they were just doing it just to earn. So the original principle of the game was faded back then. So yeah, just my personal opinion is the next generation of Web3 multiple experience would be started when the users literally enjoy the game. And just to add a little kind of vision about us, that's what we're kind of planning to build at Super B, that just give users offer users a interesting excited experience. So yeah, this is just my personal opinion, by the way. Yeah, just a little disclaimer that I joined with my personal account because I kind of want to share my personal opinions.
No, I love it. And I mean, I agree. I think that, having been kind of seen the metas go up and down and up and down, play to earn was kind of the early one. And then you kind of had the Axie era, like you said, the 2020, 2021, pure play to earn games where, we kind of saw what happened there, and that those sorts of tokenomics models wouldn't be sustainable long term. And now I think there's kind of this, conflict in the industry where a big part of the player base is still kind of looking for where is that next play to earn experience. But I think the developers are kind of seeing it and saying, well, this probably isn't sustainable. So how do we, address a player base that seems to want this because of the niche we're in? but also, build games for not just Web3 users, but all users who might find it interesting. And I think, it's a challenge in a few ways. And I've spent some time thinking about this recently with another project that I've been checking out, and which kind of touts the whole play to earn mentality. And I think that, it may not be so, because I've always kind of said, look, play to earn is dead. It's not going to survive. This is not the future of Web3 gaming. It's not, having a second job, which is playing a game, right? But I'm not sure that has to be the case if we start to think about, the word play differently. I think, the more I think about this, if we start to think about play as, well, how do I create value within a game, that people want to consume, right? If playing a game means you're part of a sandbox and you're creating UGC, and people like that UGC, then maybe you can play to earn, right? If playing a game means being an early investor, and because you're an early investor, you're also a stakeholder, through the token, and by holding that token, you're able to play the game and earn more of the token, and that causes you to recruit people and bring people into the ecosystem. Maybe there is some value creation there that can be rewarded, in quote unquote play to earn. Maybe you are, again, like some sort of content creator, and playing the game also comes with a following. Maybe there's play to earn. And the reason that, I'm saying this is because that all already exists, right? You have content creators making money playing games in the Web2 space. You have, Fortnite creative, Roblox, Minecraft creators all, making money there. You have traders, right? That's another way that's how I used to play RuneScape and Diablo, for example. I wouldn't actually play the game. I would get in there, I would trade stuff, I would try to make better items out of, lesser items through trades. That's another way that I think you can quote unquote play and earn. And I think that those systems are going to exist in Web3 and potentially be encouraged and kind of streamlined in a more transparent way through the whole, these smart contracts. And we have overtakes. I'd be interested to know, but I think that once you start to take away the rails, you start to distribute value via a token, right? So if someone's creating value, a token is a good way of rewarding them for that value in a sustainable way, because people are willing to actually pay for that value with the token, right? That's kind of the key to any sustainable tokenomics, is there has to be some value creation that people are willing to pay for, beyond speculation. And I think that the current system of gaming in Web 2 has either, created opportunities for that outside of the project and kind of on sketchy forums or whatever it might be. You have, that's existed for 20, 30 years. Or you kind of have these, like CSGO, like skins and things. You have these marketplaces that allow for it, but the developer's taking a huge chunk of those downstream sales a lot of the time, right? And UGC is very strictly regulated. I don't think that's going to be the case forever, and I think that's kind of play to earn. If the term survives, it's going to morph into, well, what does playing actually mean? How do we create value as players? And I think there's just going to be a lot of ways to create value. And I think the best projects, the ones that will stick around, are going to figure out how to use their tokens, use their NFTs to reward players for value creation beyond just, being another DAU that you can use on your next funding round, right? Like there's more to it than that. So I'd be curious with, Overtake, coming from that marketplace side of things, there's a lot of marketplaces out there, right? I guess how do you see that player to player trading? What are the themes that you're seeing, kind of changing this question a little bit to focus more on marketplaces? How are you seeing that evolving? Because it has felt pretty stagnant for a while, even with some of the big announcements from some of the major marketplaces. It kind of feels like we have what we have. How do you see that changing?
So actually, the Web3 marketplace, as you said, is actually pretty still at the moment, because what 100% my opinion, none of the teams, but I would say that for Web3 or play to earn, or for marketplace for that matter, it really needs the influx of new users constantly coming in and wanting to raise up their ranks, whether it be a game or be the NFT or have better NFTs for better airdrops, etc. Uh, but the mass adoption to Web3 isn't really happening. We haven't seen like super exciting games yet. I believe. We have great products on Sui that looks promising. But just to continue, the mass adoption didn't happen because I believe the term play to earn is somewhat fantasized. The players that play to earn games is actually more of an earn to earn guys. They're not actually here for the fun. They love the fun, of course, in the meanwhile, but their main priority would be earning the tokens and having a profit. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but that's not really sustainable for the tokenomics or any projects for that matter. Similar to the marketplace, even if the marketplaces have some tokens, they really need to build something that could make their tokens sustainable, make their product sustainable, make new users constantly coming in. So in Overtake, we looked at the marketplace differently. We're not aiming for the Web3 purely. We are trying to embrace all the games on the Web2 and Web3. Some of our backers, they already haven't been doing that in just pure Web2 scene, Item Bay, Item Mania, player auctions, so on. And we see that players really love the game, and meanwhile, of course, they love to make profits. And the constant new users in the new games in Web2 and Web3 altogether, and the new games, we're trying to mix that all up, combine it, bring it into our marketplace, and have it as so in the process that makes the constant influx to, well, just similar to a mass adoption. I'm sorry, I've been rambling, but I hope you get the idea.
No, you're good. Yeah, definitely. I guess when I think about kind of where things are going in that regard, I again I kind of go back to where I was as a player. Hardcore. I'd say 6-7 hours a day when I could as a kid playing these games, but a lot of that time was spent on that game's equivalent of a marketplace. And I think back then, the games had forums, and you would jump into a game, and you would post on the forum, and then you'd go into the game and you'd complete the trade or whatever it is. And that's how that was the game to me. In fact, I remember, probably shouldn't say this, but in Diablo, it was the reason I learned a little bit about coding Python was to have a bot that could play the game for me, because the only thing I enjoyed about playing Diablo 2 at some point after beating it 50 times was taking those items and trading them. And that was the game to me. And I think that once you insert real money, right? Like I obviously wasn't selling those items. I was just trading them for in-game items. But once you insert real money, those dynamics change, but they don't change in a way that's not sustainable. And so I think that one of the cool things about marketplaces, if we can get them right, and we can get them fully integrated, and we can get them to a place where games have some flexibility about how they integrate marketplaces, because having third-party marketplaces, I think, is a little tough even now for game developers. I think the kind of the white label approach is probably the one that's going to win out. And seeing that, players can kind of interact with other players and trade, all the things we talk about ownership. It's interesting to see that so few games have leaned into that, right? Even these metaverse type games, very few of them have peer-to-peer trades, which is something that can be done, with smart contracts. And you see that, and I see that, and I wonder, we had this 20 years ago with Diablo 2, with RuneScape, and there were entire economies that were formed. It really feels like the Web3 space is ripe for that kind of thing, and that's the type of quote-unquote play to earn that could be sustainable, right? Not the kind of grind for tokens and then figure out how to give value to those tokens. But hey, this item may be worth 10 cents or $10, but if I can trade it and make a profit, I'm trading and making a profit. And that's part of the game and the grind. And there's a lot of players who like that sort of thing. So I actually think that, marketplaces are going to play a big part in this next wave of Web3 gaming if we see it, right? I think that a lot of the interest is going to be driven, it's going to move away from grind to earn and move towards let's really understand these game economies. I mean, DeFi is proof that people love, technical analysis of charts. They want to do all these things. All games are is, a bunch of meme coins, with pictures attached to them. If you want to look at it that way, right? There are these items that go up and down in value. And if you have the right marketplace structure, you can trade those items. You can look at those items. You can say, oh, there's this new feature that came out that's going to make this item and this item more valuable. So let me go and grab those while I can. And then, sure enough, it does, or maybe it doesn't. And that's kind of the thesis around Web3 games, with kind of the added bonus, I think, and this is something we'll still see. I think as a game developer, it's harder to nerf an item in a Web3 game just because there's this expectation of continuance, right? Of something's going to persist, the strength of that item is going to persist, which makes Web3 games very hard to balance. But it also gives users a little more certainty that, that item that they collected, that grail, isn't all of a sudden going to be worthless, a few months later because there's some rebalance that needs to happen. That's probably still going to happen in the early days, but I think over time we're going to change, and it's going to be more important not to destroy the value of items. So yeah, I mean, I do think marketplaces are going to play a specific role, and I do think that they need to be different for games than like your typical OpenSea or whatever it might be. I don't think you can have a do-it-all marketplace for games. I think games have different needs. So it's cool that you guys are focused on that. All right, that was a great discussion. I know I rambled and talked way too much there. Let me kick it back to Spencer. I see a hand. Yeah, jump back in.
Yeah, you just talked about an interesting point that I wanted to point out again. Yeah, in Web3, users when they have their game assets, it's almost every time NFTs, and it's different from Web2 and Web3 gamers, because Web2 gamers, they just spend the money and expect the game items to be good for a certain time, because many games have the inflation, even in the shooting games, including Call of Duty, which I love. But in Web3, as you said, game developers have way much more harder time balancing, because once the users gets hand on a NFT, they expect it to be good until the end of the game. So, I mean, it's not every case, but it's a case that I see so oftenly, and it sometimes really destroys the new fun aspect of the games. In the developer's shoes, of course. I mean, as an investor or a player in the Web3 scene, yeah, I would expect the NFTs to hold a value for a little longer than the Web2 game items. But yeah, and very interestingly, Sui's dynamic NFT system, it really helps the overtake to help the game developers, because even as listed NFTs, game developers can have game updates on them and have the traits changed. So yeah, really good points.
All right, thanks for that, Spencer. Back to you.
Thank you, guys. Great discussion there. So the first individual question is going to go to Warped Games. So Warped has a revenue-based buyback system for its token. As revenue models for Web3 game developers evolve, how do you see projects balancing revenue generation with tokenomics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of covering based on a lot of what we've already talked about. Is I think a lot of projects before they based, raising prior to making the game. They would raise a bunch of money and build a tokenomics into the, how can we, get as much as we can right off the bat. A lot of game projects base their entire model on making that money then, and then kind of forgetting about the game, or the game comes second. And a lot of them didn't even have revenue built into like their plans. It was mostly just raising and pumping the token, and then play to earn system. And then, the play to earn system is kind of it's got expiration on it if you don't actually build in sustainable models. The token price goes down, people sell what they earn, and they move on to something else. And for us, we're focusing on long-term sustainable models and also making Web3 optional. So we're building for Web2 and Web3, and focusing on revenue, and our tokenomics are built into basically how good the game is. So the more players, the more value in the game, the more people spend in the game. We use a percent of the revenue to do buybacks, and we're not just buying back the token. We're using that token as rewards for events. So you're not just earning the token randomly as you log in. We're using it as rewards for special events, to guide players into areas of our game, to make seasonal events special, and redirect traffic in our game and players in a way that keep the game, exciting and fun on that level. But it's only based on the revenue we build. So the tokenomics, it's not on just flushing out as fast as possible. It's building onto a long-term sustainable model, and utilizing Web2 and Web3 revenue into the buybacks. And so, Web3 it's a small crowd, and it's kind of just cycling the money back around into that pool. But if we can utilize Web2 money and bring it into Web3, we can maybe onboard more players to come into Web3 through that model, and just using a percentage of the revenue. So the better the game gets, the better the rewards get for the players, and the more popular it gets on that side.
I love it. Yeah, I have to admit, we had a different question for you guys, but I was looking at the project and kind of the background and what you guys were doing, and I really liked that buyback model, because we think about a lot of incentive alignment with holders and whatnot, and so I changed it because I wanted to hear a bit more about it.
Yeah,
And I think it makes sense. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I appreciate that. And I also think, like what you were talking about before with regulations and trying to fit that in, like you can't just, as like a legitimate company, in various countries, you can't just say we're buying back the token, for value's sake. There's got to be utility and a reason for it. And if you look at like play to earn games and their models and the tokenomics, it's just a downward slope from the top, because people just earn and sell and earn and sell. So if you have a method where you can buy back the token and incentivize players to come in and utilize that token, but also the players that get the token as rewards have voting powers on our game design and seasons and themes. And so if you earn that token in the game, you have a voice on game development direction and design and art, planet names to actual environments, and you get a voice, and you feel more attached to it, the game itself, and you want to come back and play. And it kind of, it's getting that cycle, so people don't just get the token and leave, because that's what we've seen in the past, is people just selling and moving on and farming. We want actual real players, and there's a space for everyone. You can build those games, and I think that those games are always going to exist. There's going to be the quick games that are quickly made for earning and people move on, but we're building our game for a sustainable long time. Like we want, we're putting a lot of effort into the looks of the game, the playability, the fun factor. And you don't do that. You don't spend all that time building a game like that for people to come in and just earn and sell and move on. Like we want to keep people in there. So how can we keep people around? And that's kind of what we're focusing on, really, is sustainable long-term players and retention.
Yeah, and that's, you kind of touched on where I was going to go with my follow-up. It is, there are, we've been, at least we're a U.S. company. I'm not sure, you sound like you have an American accent, but I'm not sure where you're based.
Yeah, we're U.S. too.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's been this constant challenge, which I always kind of refer to, calling a duck a duck. I think for the longest time, companies that are building tokens with real utility, and using it as a funding method, have had this like challenge of incentive alignment, because if you say, hey, this is some sort of stake in the company, you're going to get hit with, the securities laws and
Yeah.
all of the, the problems. And then even buybacks, like you were saying, you have to kind of dance around it, right? I think, unfortunately, some of the maybe most sustainable models, at least, and this is purely my opinion, not necessarily ours as a project, but my opinion for how things evolve in the Web3 space, I do think we're going to see some sort of regulatory, like actual regulation come out that makes it easier for projects that are actually trying to use the token in a way that creates value to be more transparent about how they're going to do that, even if that is a purely financial product, right? Like, I think that if there was no rule that said, hey, if you own this token, you get 50% of our revenue and it's going to be distributed evenly to token holders. If there weren't all these regulations, that could be a very sustainable model for, crowdfunding, more niche projects. Now, obviously, as you get up bigger companies, you've got publishers, you've got investors, and realistically, that's kind of what, VCs are doing in a roundabout way for the projects that they select, right? But I think that, you've got this kind of gap between VC startup funding and, Kickstarter, which doesn't really give you any stake. And I think there's a real potential for Web3 to, tokens to fill that gap in a sustainable way. But as founders, we have to get really creative about
Yeah.
how, you dress up something so that at the end of the day, because, how we test, unfortunately, if you say, hey, if we do good, you do good, then it's a security. And that's like the big feared term. But I think that's blocking so much innovation, specifically in the gaming space, because it's the place where you don't necessarily want your players to hold the token, right? You want to give them incentives, but a holder isn't always going to have the same incentives as a player, right? And I think that's the challenge is
Yep.
you want to build certain incentives for holders, you want to build certain incentives for players, and that Venn diagram isn't always overlapping, right? And so I think that's the challenge we have because of regulations is you can't just do whatever you want. You can't even do whatever you think is best sometimes. You got to get creative. And I liked how you guys were getting creative with that. So I figured, that was cool. So thank you for your response there. And we're constantly thinking about ways we can do the same.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So Spencer, back to you. Why don't we jump to the next question?
Sounds good. So next question is for Overtake. So what do you think needs to change for Web2 or traditional players to embrace the ownership narrative we have been pushing as Web3 developers?
Well, so the general Web2 users, I don't know why. Well, there were a lot of cases, but there's a mental barrier to use the Web3 technology or just be related to it. So that would be the first step for the Web2 users to overcome, and then the next step would be the Web2 players realizing that if the games become Web3, they can have the full control of their gaming assets. So for right now, in the beginning, there was a mention of a CSGO skin, the gun skins. I mean, it's tradable on the Steam Marketplace. Players can get it from the loot box, but the 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 fees for the transaction fees that the game companies take is just tremendous amounts compared to what it could have been in Web3. So that would be another step. So there has to be an enlightenment to the Web2 users that, including me, I still play Web2 games too, that we could own game assets, we could own the game items, and it's not just the RPGs, like every game players could become a playable character themselves and play the world, play the games as they would like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, there's probably a couple things that we're going to see happen as the tech gets better. And I think we talked about this a little bit before. I mean, you look at just recently what happened with the stablecoin bills that were just passed and the Genius Act in the US, and just this idea that international wire transfers are no longer going to require this complex, multi-step custodial process that takes forever because you have to clear all these different security. I mean, there's similar infrastructure being built around custody and game assets when there's a real money value attached to them. They still have to comply with AML regulations, which is anti-money laundering. They have to do certain KYC in order to do cash outs. There's the potential that crypto, creates rails, with positive regulation, and that a CSGO says, well, hey, we can either do this crazy crap that's costing us a bunch of money, and the only way we can do it is by, having big, fees attached to this to make it worth it to us. Or, we can adopt this new technology, back end the whole thing so users don't even see it. And then, everything's peer to peer and we're not custodying anything. Right. And so I think that's, from a technical standpoint, something we're going to see. But I also think that ownership, I think it's kind of our job to educate users and gamers, not on what Web3 is, but what ownership could actually mean. I mentioned that I was an IP lawyer and in the copyright space back in the entertainment industry before I started doing this. And what intrigued me about the space was the fact that we really don't have any rights as it comes to these gaming items. And that makes it very difficult to do deals that expand beyond, a single ecosystem, right? So if DC Comics wants to do a deal where they're going to do a deal with Fortnite, and they're going to, basically say, hey, we're going to give you the right to use our Superman character, which they just did, in your game. You guys are going to maybe with Fortnite, the deal looks different, but usually it's, some sort of royalty fee, and some sort of minimum guarantee if you're a smaller project. And that's the model. It's going to be in your space. It's going to be limited to your space. It can't go anywhere else. You can't use it anywhere else. You can't use it in marketing assets, but you can use it in the game. And that in part is because these IPs, can't imagine what would happen if they didn't. The lawyers are saying, oh, wow, we got to protect ourselves in every way. But it's also because there's no kind of standard rights associated with digital assets the same way that we have standard rights associated with physical assets. I mean, if you're thinking about a Superman skin, imagine if DC did a deal with a costume store for that same Superman costume, but they said this costume can only be used within your store in a 10-mile radius, and no one can take pictures of it and put it online. No one can do this with it. No one can alter it. You can't cut the sleeves off. You can't do any of those things. That would be crazy, right? And that's just because it's a physical asset. And the reason it's crazy is because we have, 70, 80 years of jurisprudence that says, no, there's certain rights that attach to physical objects. And so I think what Web3 for the first time really allows us to do is create something, this tangible digital asset that's separate from the IP, and then, do things with it like we can do with the physical assets, whether that's taking it to another ecosystem, whether that's buying and selling it, whether, that's transferring it, whatever it may be. You have this more tangible digital asset now that we can start to define the ownership rights around. Now, the reality is no one's done that yet, right? And it's going to take the courts and the regulators and all that a while. We can't just assume those rights, but we're getting there. And I think that for me was the thing that, 7 years ago now interested me in the potential. And it's taken a much longer than I thought it would for us to kind of get even rolling with those discussions, but we're finally getting there. I think, and we're finally starting to see progress there. And I think over the next 5 years, the term ownership when it comes to digital assets is actually going to mean something. Because right now it doesn't mean anything to a player. You ask a Web2 player if they own their objects, they're going to tell you, yes, I own it because it's in my account and I can use it. But ownership, if you ask them the same thing about that t-shirt or that toy sword that they gave their kid, it's going to be a different story about what ownership means to them in that case, right? So I think there's a gap we got to close there. But I'll give you, if you want to say anything else on that. I know I just blabbed for a while.
It was just perfect. Yeah, like Web2 users, they're gonna say they own it because they have it in their inventory, but it can just easily disappear if the game developers. I mean, it's not going to be that easy, but you know what I mean. It's going to be easy for the game developers just like to rip it off of their inventory. So, yeah, I think the ownership, it will be really important stuff in the future.
Definitely, yeah, and we've seen it. I mean, I think there was a story, I don't know the specific details, but one of the reasons that Vitalik created Ethereum was because of some dispute over his game assets. I should probably know the exact stories, but I think we're running low on time, so we won't do a deep dive there. But yeah, Spencer, back to you.
Awesome. Yes. So final question here. And then just a reminder for everyone who's here listening, we're doing a giveaway for 500 bits, our in-game currency, at the end of the space. So if you're still here, make sure to stick around for the last few minutes, when we choose a winner. But yeah, so last question to Super B. Social gaming is evolving fast. What do you think makes a multiplayer experience truly meaningful and memorable in today's landscape?
Oh, okay, finally it's my chance. Yeah, so I actually overtake, DW, and like you guys were like kind of mentioning about ownership already. So I was like about to talk about like like ownership of like social gaming, which is kind of like can be like pretty random, but like for the kind of like I'll just like share my team's like kind of vision as well, like a beforehand, like to provide like this kind of like truly meaningful and memorable like experience and like social gaming. Actually, we are kind of like using kind of like blockchain technology to give this kind of experience that users can have their own like ownership not only for their items, but just to like briefly kind of like introduce our game, like we're having like the social function, which has like a guest note that you can just like visit other like players like profile and like leave a message to them, or like they can just like like take a photo together, or like they can like collaborate together and like build like some user generated content like that. So like all our user generated content will be minted on like as an NFT, and they will be like stored at like wallet storage, which means that they're gonna like last forever, even though like even after like our server is like closed. So yeah, I was like kind of want to mention that this kind of like like it can be like stated as like memories, like all the guest notes, all the interactions, all the like memories you made together, like all the kind of like interaction you did together at Super B platform. It's like Super B space is like a literally memories, and users will have their ownership for the memories in the game. So yeah, that's what I personally, as always, like I personally thought about, like the truly meaningful and memorable like experience as a social game, that you own your social experience, you own your social interaction. So yeah, that's what Super B is building, and that's like personally what I think about like the meaningful experience. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you've seen I mean, I think with the PFP boom, if people can draw a connection to a particular NFT, or if it actually means something to them beyond just the utility it provides or the number sign going up, you unlock a whole new layer of fandom. So it totally makes sense to take that approach. And yeah, I think that's super cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. All right, Spencer, I think we'll skip the last everyone question for today. Maybe we'll start with it next week, because we're short on time. Why don't we announce the winner, and then we can wrap things up?
Sounds good. So let me just make sure the winner that we picked is still here. Looks like they are not. And then our backup winner. Yes, our backup winner is here. So the winner this week of 500 bits is Crypto Master, or at Felix Boniface 2. Congratulations. So in order to claim your prize, please just, send, us a DM, to the Satoshiverse account, and we should be able to get you all set up there. Nick. So, yeah, there you go. Send it back to you.
Amazing. All right. Well, congratulations. And I'll give the 30-second version. We could probably have a whole discussion about this, but Bits is something that we released a little while ago. And kind of following up on the conversation we had about tokens and sustainability. We worked for a long time on creating a token that essentially can't be traded on exchanges and all these different things. It's a semi-soul-bound token. And so what it does is it's essentially the Web3 equivalent of like a V-Bucks or a Fortnite that can be used within all the smart contracts within our ecosystem, but not outside of it. So it's kind of like a soulbound token on steroids, or an actual on-chain reward token that we've been working with. And you know, if you want to learn more, there's more on the website about how we're working that we combine with some of the first NFT liquidity pools out there. And so we've got, you know, fluid swaps of our NFTs for bits, so that there's always liquidity to be had amongst the different NFTs in the projects. That's something we'll be building out, and hopefully reaching out to some of the developers on this space, as we, you know, we're piloting the program right now, but we see a lot of potential in that, you know, pump fund for NFTs. So we'll see what happens. All right. So thank you everybody who joined. Thank you to all the speakers for taking the time out of your day. Lots of new faces, lots of guests. So thank you for showing up, representing your projects and your communities. What we'll do now is just a very quick, and I apologize for running over, very quick 3 minutes closeout. If anyone wants to kind of give people a last, you know, we have a lot more people now than when we started. So if you want to give a quick closeout on what you guys are doing, where to find you. In our case, I'll be very brief. You know, we're Satoshiverse, we're the Hideout, we're Legions 2029. If you're into gaming and the Web3 space in general, check out our social media. We have a free-to-play game with lots of opportunities to, you know, win contests and just create some really cool stuff. Tons of NFTs, bits, lots of stuff. It's all in the post at the top of the spaces and pinned to our profile. So check out our Twitter, jump into the Discord. That's the best play, and it's free to play. It's a game that we spent, you know, about 3 years with about 30 people working full time on. So a lot of fun, you know, good game. Check it out, free to play. Get it before it's not, I guess. Let's go over to Claire, then Overtake, then Warped, and then we will we'll close out.
So, is it like a last minute comment, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Tell people where to find you, where the best place to find you guys is, and just for anyone who didn't hear it before, just let them know what you're all about.
Yeah, I think, like, for now, I feel like it's better to, you know, join with the official account. So let me just, like, tag this, our official account. It's, like, superb/b.b/io. So it's our official account, and you could just, like, you know, get all the updates there, like, from our profile. There's like a link tree that you can just like check our Discord, like Medium, YouTube, every like resources there. And just to like quickly kind of like promote our current status, like we're now on a stage of like a beta test stage called like closed beta test. It's like open till like next week, so we're like doing it for like 12, like, you know, like 2 weeks straight. And, you know, we have a bigger reward for that. We have like more like game modes there, so you can just like join us for closed beta test and just like, you know, kind of like learn more about us, like, you know, learn more about how fun like Web3 game can be. And if you cannot, you know, kind of like hop into this kind of like hop into this kind of like gaming, you can just like, you know, watch our streaming. Like we're gonna like stream a game with Sui Foundation in August, and like, you know, we have a bunch of like streaming that like users do, like they create the contents here, so you can just like, you know, update, like, you know, have our updates on our socials. And yeah, thank you for inviting.
Amazing. Well, so great to have you. Thanks for helping organize this. All right, over to Overtake.
Thank you guys for coming in. Wherever you are in the world, Overtake is currently in its open beta test. You can search up overtake.market. But there's only a few games on right now. Much more games coming soon. Of course, in RTG in August. Many people are worried that if the TG is not going to be in August. I've heard it definitely it's going to be in August, because we can't change the dates. I can only say this much. Thank you.
I love it. It's happening because it's happening. All right. Let's go over to Warped, and then we'll close out.
Hey, yeah, we're Warped Games, building Warped Universe. Please give us, if you're on Steam or Epic, give us a wish list on there. That means the world to us. And we will be at Gamescom in less than a month on the floor. You can come and check our game and play it out. We got new planets, new maps, new environments no one has seen yet, new enemies, new art, new weapons, sounds, visuals. Everything's going to be there's a lot to show on Gamescom, and then we're going to start closed beta after that, and we'll also be at Korea Blockchain Week the next month. So come check us out if you're around, or wishlist and follow our content. We do lots of Steam updates as well to talk about the process of designing games and what we're, our thoughts and everything about it. So yeah, wishlist.
Amazing. Definitely go wishlist it. I was checking out the graphics before. It looks awesome. We'll wrap up with that. Thank you everyone so much. Thanks to the people who joined and everyone who will be watching after the fact, all over the world. Thank you. And we will see you next week at the same time for another episode. Thanks everyone.